hear from State Representative Nika Elugardo, represents the 15th Suffolk, Norfolk, which includes Mission Hill, JP, Roslindale, and Brookline. She is an attorney, policy leader, and progressive trailblazer. Rep. Nika.
Thank you, Erica, and thank you, Saida and Matthew for CARE for organizing. Thank you, Senator Lewis, for hosting, and to the powerful speakers. So grateful for all of you and the youth speakers. I find myself saying so often, I want to be you when I grow up, to people that are a lot younger than me, because I'm sure you have issues, but all that comes across here is how much you've got together. And I feel like we're in good hands, not just in the future, but right now with your leadership. And thank you also, Emily. I saw that Senator, well, it says Senator Ed Kennedy. Does it mean Senator Ed Markey is on? Anyway, I just want to shout that out and say thank you, Senator, for being here. You know, what I want to speak to before others go into the details of the bill, which I'm grateful that we're going to get to hear some of the nuts and bolts, is the curriculum development. An anti-racist curriculum isn't just a matter of head knowledge. It's a very deeply personal and life transforming and community transforming experience to have mentors and educators, not just teachers, but everyone involved in a child's education, really to understand the depth and the beauty of their cultural contributions historically and at present, and really just of their experience and background, particularly as BIPOC students. I was asked to share a little bit of my own experience. You know, I went to 8 different public schools. Our family lived in poverty. We were evicted a lot, basically, and other things caused us to move around a lot. But eventually, I landed in a private school. So after 8 schools, I went to a private school for 5 years and graduated and came to MIT and Harvard and beyond here in Boston. But while I was at this school, you know, I experienced the detriment of having my teachers not understand anything about who I am and where I come from, except for their horrific stereotypes about what it meant to be either Black or poor or both. So for example, you know, I had a trigonometry teacher who said, Nika, you need to go take the math level 2 exam. You are brilliant in this area. And I honestly didn't even know until she said it to me that I had some sort of gift that I should get tested for to help with college access. And then she sent me to the guidance counselor to get the paperwork, because young folks on the call, before we had internet, you had to like mail away for all this stuff to even get an application and, you know, send your check back and all of that. And so you would go to the guidance counselor and they would provide the application for you to mail it in. And the guidance counselor who I met on that day and had never spoken to me before said, you're not going to get to any of the schools that require, you're not going to get into any of the schools that require a math level 2 exam, Nika. So I'm not going to waste your time. And frankly, I'm not going to waste mine. And I was shocked. I was like, what makes you say that? Like, I just met you today. My trigonometry teacher sent me here. So she thinks that I could do well in the exam. And she repeated her statement. And I said to her, if you don't give me the application, I'm going to search your office until I find it. And she just looked at me kind of stunned. And I did search her office and find the application. I put her office back like it was before. There was no vandalism involved or even rage. I was just like kind of put off by this lady. But thankfully, I had other influences in my life who had already taught me who I was and where I come from. And these are isolated events. I had a French teacher who I was sort of looking out at these ivy colored walls of this private school, ivy covered. They had brick walls patterned after sort of an Ivy League, I guess was the idea. And I was learning French at a young age for me. And I thought, this is amazing. And I said out loud in French, every kid in my neighborhood should have this kind of education. And the French teacher said back to me in French, the kids in your neighborhood would ruin this school. And I said, I'm the only kid in this neighborhood that you've ever met. Am I ruining the school? And then she started yelling at me in French. It was a little too advanced for me to keep up, but it wasn't good. And there were other situations, just at educators, not even looking at the trash you get from people on the street or in your job as a teenager or whatever, managers. And, fortunately for me, even though we grew up in poverty and my parents were sometimes crime involved or whatever, so we had a lot of those factors that people think should make a kid's life horrible. I had a beautiful life because I was loved and I was taught about my people and where we come from. My parents sent me to a free summer school, several summers, Arambe Aruhu, where we learned Afrocentric education when I was 7 and 8 years old. And I learned about African contributions worldwide, historically, and in the United States, African Americans and Black people of African descent. And my grandmother worked at the Martin Luther King Library, where she and her coworkers would constantly lecture / teach me on the high expectations that our people should have of ourselves because of our strong contributions in our history and our present contributions to the city that I was growing up in. And I had that power with me when I walked into any room, the power of my communities teaching me. But imagine the power of educators joining in, not just because of what it would do to encourage me, but because of the way that it would transform the way that they operate. Even though we're talking about teachers and education, children are educated along the way, and they believe what you tell them. They believe what they hear. There are some kids that have been, I'm just going to be honest, shooting each other in my district. And it took me 3 years to track them all down with the help of amazing youth workers and street workers and others. And when I find these kids who are mugging or shooting people, we always engage them in a process where I'm like, listen, I need you to use your leadership to get things done at the State House. And on another call, I'll tell you some of those stories. But the short story is, with the help of these kids and other kids who already had their act together, who are mentors to them, we have been able to bring over $1 million in youth-related budget money into my district, because they dive in and they help when they realize you're supposed to be contributing to transforming our communities. This is the power. This is how transformational it can be to have just a handful of adults know what you're capable of and believe in you. And that is what happens when teachers have an understanding of who they're looking at that breaks down their own stereotypes that they might not even know that they have. Even the well-meaning teachers who aren't overtly racist have experienced a form of structural racism that the youth and Emily spoke to, that you're perpetuating, even sometimes teachers of color, limited views of our own cultures that elevate the colonial culture still today. And so this is about changing lives and communities, not just educating educators. And when teachers even go to the museum, I've heard teachers go to the African American Museum, come back transformed, and all of their students know the difference. Their Black students are like, wow, I feel seen and heard. After a 2-day trip, imagine what extensive training and a commission that keeps the work going and keeps the training improving and helps us continuously get better at this work of having true equity in education, truly standing up to our constitutional obligation here in Massachusetts, where we first wrote that provision into our Constitution, even before equal education was written into the American Constitution. Here we can be a leader, as was said. And I'm very grateful to you all for partnering with Senator Lewis and myself on this bill on the House side H584. So when you're calling your legislators, don't just ask them to support the bill, ask them to call not only the committee chairs, it's education right now, and the House Ways and Means Committee Chair Michaelwitz on the House side, but also ask them to say, we want you to bring this to the floor for a vote quickly so that you can demonstrate to our students who are organizing across the Commonwealth that you're ready to take the leap with us into an education that's truly just, so that we can inspire a whole generation of folks who know that justice is the underpinning of their education and therefore their future.